How did you find Louise Perry, and talk a little bit about what you wrote about her? Because I thought some of those posts I thought were just tremendous.
Well, so to go back to a little bit of my biography, so I would say I grew up fundamentalist, deconstructed, kind of became a progressive Christian, a big voice in the, so a lot of people who followed the late Rachel Held Evans.
Yep.
Rachel was a friend, and so a lot of people that followed Rachel followed me.
Yep.
So I was a part of that kind of deconstructing ex-evangelical kind of crew. But like I said, starting around the publication of Unclean, this is like 2011, 2012. I've been blogging about 5-6 years now. I started kind of doing a reconstruction turn. And a lot of it was just about the desolations I was experiencing in progressive Christianity. And so I on my blog, I describe myself often as a post-progressive.
Yep.
And that's a term I've just made up, where I wouldn't say I'm like reacted against the progressivism, but I've gone on and now want to embrace that call to social justice, but also to point out the toxicity in the pathologies amongst progressive Christianity. Like some of that I said earlier on was like my early post about the purity culture of social justice warriorism, the dynamics of the cancel culture. And so I'm interested in critiques of, as a former post-progressive, I'm interested in criticisms of progressivism that come from within progressivism. So that's post-progressive. So, we've moved through that, and now we're trying to critique. And so Louise Perry is like an obvious fit for that conversation, because here's a woman that's describing herself as a feminist. She's not writing from a Christian perspective. So it'd be easy to do. Like there are evangelical bloggers out there that are going to critique the sexual revolution from an evangelical perspective. But I'm not an evangelical. That's not my sandbox. My audience are people that were drawn to me because of my early progressivism, but are now getting disillusioned. And Perry's helpful there because she's critiquing from within. So her case against the sexual revolution does that in ways from just a sheer, from a feminist perspective, the sexual revolution is hurting women. And so that's what I was intrigued with her, is that self-criticism in her argument, and wanted to blog through that, because I also think that back to kind of this evangelism kind of thing, if Jordan Peterson can be helpful and helping us think through about how the Bible might be discussed in a post-Christian culture, then I think Louise Perry's book is really helpful to talk about the sexual revolution and sexuality, because I think that's obviously one of the most contested areas between the conservative and the progressive group. And I think what Perry's doing is one of those in-between kinds of things, where she's describes herself as a feminist and yet uses feminism to argue against some of the pathologies of our current sexual culture. And so I am interested in a project where there is a compelling Christian sexual ethic that my students can be drawn to. But it's not going to be like a reversion back to like an evangelical purity culture. So that's the needle to be threaded here. And so I for the first time, I began kind of using her material in lectures this last semester. So I did in my psychology and Christianity class, I did a lecture on sexuality for the first time. And I used her, this is kind of a dark thing to say, but about how sex among young people is becoming increasingly violent. And so if I cited a couple studies on my blog when I reviewed this chapter of her book about the rise of choking, where like 2/3 of college women have been choked during sex in some studies. That's so the majority. And the reason is because of the rampant pornography use.
Yeah.
And so like that's a really weird thing to bring up on a Christian campus, and kind of bring some of this stuff to light, things that are happening in bedrooms across, right throughout my campus and all sorts of campuses. And just like, hey, I'm not going to kind of preach at you like an evangelical is going to preach at you, but like, is something going on that's kind of dark happening in us? And if so, how can we get to a healthier place? And I think Perry's book is great at raising that conversation in the way kind of woke feminist students can hear. That they're not going to immediately object to it as problematic, but on their own terms say, yeah, that's true. This isn't good for women. Maybe I've been sold a bill of goods. So it's a phenomenal resource if you're trying to talk about sex in a liberal or progressive space.